Hello viewers, welcome to my first video on drawing clothing. In this video I'll be sharing some tips that I use for drawing clothing, which can be a daunting task. So hopefully what I have to say helps you out. Let's jump right into it. So in this first drawing here, I wanted to show what a t-shirt theoretically looks like in two different dimensions. So when you take a t-shirt, you lay it out on your bed, on a table, it's flat. It is a article of clothing designed to cover the human figure. So the center drawing is more what it would look like in perspective. You come along to the drawing on the right, and if we were to fill a t-shirt with air, this is in a really general way what it would look like on the human form. Because that's the intention. The clothing is designed to fit on the human form. If you're having trouble with this, you could build like a little structural armature like I'm doing here with the blue. This would help you get an idea of just how this shirt fits in space in your drawing. We're going to move on to the next clip here. So in this sketch, just wanted you to get a general idea of what a sweatshirt might look like. I've added sleeves instead of long sleeves instead of just a t-shirt. You fill the sweatshirt up with air, it pretty much takes this kind of general shape, real basic. Then coming forward here, the same shape, only this time I added hands so you could get an idea of what, the palms are facing down in this drawing. So the sleeves are going to be twisted. If the thumb was up, you wouldn't have as much twisting in the fabric. But here, with the palms down, you have a wristband on the sweatshirt, so it's going to grab a hold of the wrist and twist with the wrist. So that's going to result in this spiraling of the fabric. And at the wrist, it's going to be a little tighter. You can draw, tighter folds in the fabric. As you work your way up the arm, the folds are kind of going to get further apart until you reach the shoulder where there's not really any twisting going on. Another thing to note about like a sweatshirt, it's a little bit heavier material. You're probably only going to see, your shoulders are going to be more pronounced, probably your chest. So those are going to be the parts that you probably like of the underlying figure that you can see come through the fabric. Your waistband, your abdomen, probably not going to be able to see the definition of, somebody's abs in a sweatshirt like this. You're probably only going to end up with some wrinkles, some folds in the fabric here. So you can try to keep that real basic there, and I think that's more believable than if you were to add, a lot of the musculature underneath. There might be a little bit more tension of the sweatshirt pulling away from the chest here. But for the most part, like a sweatshirt like this, it's going to be minimal. You're mostly looking at the wrinkles in fabric and not a whole lot of the structure underneath. You just can get an idea of the overall structure of the form underneath. But be careful on adding too much definition. So in this sketch, I just wanted you to get an idea of, a shirt, if it's sitting flat, you blow it up with air like in the previous clip. Your shirts, any clothing's designed to cover the human form. And then if you add your arms and your head, that's what you'd end up getting. It does fill that space. Now, when you end up adding the arms and head, there's going to be, depending on the figure, somebody might have might be working out more, have a bigger chest. It depends on how tight you've got to have an idea in mind of how tight your fabric is too. Like, do I want to portray this character in a bulky shirt or a real tight fitting shirt? This guy's going to have shoulder muscles here. His deltoids, going to have your bicep. It splits off into your forearm. Same on this side. So this shirt's not going to have a whole lot of, if I just go for general wrinkles, there's going to be some tension where it pulls down here. Sometimes if you start with a spiral. You know, you start with a heavy line, then a couple trailing lines. That can be effective. Now some shirts might pull the other way here. So let's see. It's kind of dependent on what fabric you're going for, but there is a seam here. You know, the stitching can play effect too. You know, if you had a stitching here, you might tend to have, you can draw your wrinkles as kind of panels like this too, like balloons. That can be effective. But where the seam is, you might have some fabric pulling away from that seam, like where stitching would be. A lot of times you don't see stitching represented in comic book art, but I think it can be pretty effective and add to the realism. So there's some stitching under the armpit here, which means that the shirt can want to pull with tension that way too, you know, across. Now here we're going like, you know, northwest here. We, you know, have a compass. And then the shirt's going to want to pull a little bit across the chest. I mean, these would be, the chest lines would be kind of light. You know, here you've got a high point, so you might have some panels there, you know, where the fabric wrinkles up. This is real basic. Now in the next drawings, we're going to get a little bit more detailed. And so we're going to cut to the next drawing here. So in this drawing, I'm going to just draw kind of a sketch or a drawing of this muscular guy. He's praying or worshiping, and he's pretty built, so that's going to have an effect on the clothing that we place on him. Now right now he has no shirt on. For the purpose of this video, I really didn't have to go into so much detail on his torso and everything, because we're not really going to see that. But I wanted you to get an idea of his overall shape underneath the clothing. So here I brought down the opacity on the figure layer and drew the t-shirt. I kept this t-shirt very basic for the purpose of this video. I didn't get caught up in a lot of the smaller details. What we want to look at is our main points of tension in the fabric. In the corners, there's going to be tension. You know, as that shirt tightens around this muscle, and it's going to be tightest in between the muscles, the bicep and the deltoid there. So there's going to be more wrinkles there. There's going to be more wrinkles coming out of the armpit. You're also looking for high points. If you're, you know, this was done out of imagination, not from reference. So, like his chest muscle, this is going to be a high point right here, where the fabric's going to want to pull against those points. Same with here. The fabric's going to pull, but it's also attached, tucked in here, so there's going to be some tension as the fabric pulls on the waist, you know, from the waistline. Same with this armpit, and across this shoulder, there's going to be tension here. Depending on how, this is a semi-tight fitting shirt, so it also is affected by what kind of fabric you're trying to portray in your drawing. Like this shirt isn't super tight, like an athletic fit polyester shirt or whatever. This is maybe more like a cotton blend, you know. But so this guy that I drew here is fairly muscular. So like the high points, you know, where there's going to be, the shirt's going to be tightest, there's going to be less wrinkles. Might be a few wrinkles in here. Yeah, so you just want to keep that in mind, and really keep it simple first. You know, do your work on the basics first, and then go in. And it's the same thing with your drawing stages. You know, you work on your overall form needs to be correct. Then your individual shapes need to be worked out. And then your details, like your cross hatching and what brings those, you know, like the musculature out, the different striations in the muscle. It's the same thing with the shirt. Keep it simple first. Don't add a lot of, you know, I could keep going and going on this, and this is really basic. just work on the main, what are going to be your main points of tension, your main wrinkles in the fabric. So here, I erased out the figure under the sweatshirt, but this is like a loose fitting sweatshirt. So your main points of tension are going to be your chest again. In here it's going to pull tight. Deltoids, your bicep, it's going to pull tight. Probably the outside of the arms are going to be have the most tension here, which this is more of a loose fitting sweatshirt, so you're not going to be able to see all the musculature. Only the larger muscles are going to be presented, like the chest, the deltoids, biceps. Forearms not so much, because like a hoodie tends to be a little bit loose fitting around the forearms in particular. This is a pretty muscular guy. Same thing with your torso. There's not going to be a lot of definition there. Now, again, like same with the t-shirt, I kept this pretty simple. Now I could go in and do all my little details, my feathering and stuff. That's what I would normally do. On the iPad, I find it difficult to do that stuff. I don't know if I'm just need to bump up the resolution, but that's why I much more like working in pencil. But for this video, I thought the iPad would suit like this video, just because I can play the time lapse and show you what I'm doing. So also one other thing to remember here, his wrists are slightly turned, so there's going to be a twisting, a twisting of the shirt here. There's also going to be a point of tension on the elbows, which I could have represented a little bit better. So that's one thing to keep in mind. That's all based on how loose fitting you want your shirt to be. This was all drawn out of imagination, so I didn't draw this from reference. The one way in anything to become familiar with how fabric or how your hands look or how a head looks is to draw from reference over and over and over again. Fill a sketchbook. Bring up, it doesn't have to be anything you show anybody, so you can bring up, Google images of just put in men's t-shirts and just, draw from reference, or go out into a public place, well, there's not too many malls anymore, like some outdoor place, like a park or somewhere where there's people, baseball game, football game. Just bring your sketchbook and just do some quick sketches. That'll get you familiar with how do shirts look on different people. And those, at a game or in a public place, you're going to have so many different people with different shapes of bodies and different clothing. And if you really want to become familiar with drawing clothing, that's an excellent way to start. So in the next clip here, I'm going to show you the same figure with a poncho on. Okay, in this sketch, our figure is more draped in a rain poncho, kind of like Bruce Willis in Unbreakable. Your more defining structure underneath is most likely going to be your shoulders and your chest again, kind of similar to the sweatshirt. Whereas as the fabric bunches up across the bicep, your wrinkles do have to conform to that bicep shape. This guy's got some pretty good biceps. His arms are bent, so that would result in some flexing in the biceps there. But as the fabric drapes down, it's going to curl in a little bit, and then there's going to be some bunching at the bottom. Out here in this plane, maybe not so much. The wrinkles are going to be fewer and far between. There's going to be some pulling here away from the chest. And then the same thing on the back side. This fabric's bunched up. But to start, if you're working this out, try to keep your wrinkles. Just draw the main wrinkles. You can go in later and draw all the little details, but if your main wrinkles aren't convincing, let me just get rid of my blue here. If your main wrinkles aren't convincing, then the rest of it's probably not going to be convincing. Try to start with same with your your basic structure of the figure. If your arms aren't shaped right, probably the little details are not going to be that believable. Now some people draw things abstract that work really well, but if you're going for realism, you want overall structure to look believable. But else the details in between, like as you break it down, they're just not gonna be as believable to the viewer. Same with the clothing. Try to get the main wrinkles in there, and then you can go in and draw little details if you want, or you can leave it simple like this. I mean, I don't think this is. I would probably go in later and add some more feathering and stuff like this, but for the most part, I think this looks believable. I don't know, let me know what you think in the comments. So that's going to conclude part 1 of drawing clothing. I hope you found this video helpful in your own drawing ventures. So get out there and draw from life, draw from reference, draw from an imagination. If you like this video, please select the like button and/or subscribe. Also check out my website at inkwarfare.com. And I'm on Instagram at ink.warfare. So thanks for watching. We'll see you in the next video.